Before we dive into today's episode, there's a special offer happening this month I don't want you to miss. If you've considered coaching support but can't possibly fit another meeting into your schedule, my calendar-free accountability package is the answer, including flexible check-ins through a messaging app for on-demand support. This subscription is half off through December 19th with a bonus clarity call to get you started. Book now and lock in the discounted rate for the lifetime of your subscription. Go to positivelyproductive.com/coaching. Saying conceptually, yes, I have kids and I know that there's a lot of demand there, but then the precious few moments that I have, I want to make the most of. That then becomes how you are assessing what moments are of value and what kind of value they are and what kind of value they are to you. And the reason I'm saying it in that way, which is very generic, is because you get to choose. You're listening to the Positively Living podcast. I'm your host, Lisa Zaratny, founder of Positively Productive Systems and a productivity coach certified in positive psychology and stress management. Join me as we explore ways to live a more proactive, positive life with episodes on productivity, self-awareness, mindset, entrepreneur life, habits and systems, simplicity, fun, and more. I understand overwhelm personally as a multi-passionate entrepreneur, wife and mom to kids and cats, and as a caregiver. I'm here to help you choose what's right for you so you can do less, live more, and breathe easier. Sound good? Let's get to it. Welcome to the Positively Living podcast. In today's special strategy call episode, I am coaching Naomi Lerman, a trauma-informed mindset coach and founder of Victory Dance Coaching. I've often said coaches need coaches, and Naomi is a wonderful example of that. She's also a fantastic example of a high achiever who has tried so many ways to be productive and needed a fresh perspective, which is precisely what I do. In today's coaching session, I help her overcome her struggles with setting up a value-aligned schedule so she can find balance and harmony with her family, all while building her purpose-led business. Because this is our initial session, we covered the high-level assessment you will find in a clarity call. We needed to review her tendencies, personality, values, and strengths first, and then review her struggles, such as context switching, decision fatigue, and estimating her capacity properly. She has so much she wants to do and so little time to do it. If that sounds familiar, you'll definitely want to listen in. We ended up with a combination of mindset shifts and strategic approaches to help her reach her goals without burning out. During our session, I mentioned two topics, prioritizing and the 4D system, which I've done episodes about, and I will link to those in the show notes. And if you listen in and this kind of coaching session sounds good to you, you'll want to check out the coaching page of the positivelyproductive.com website and click on the clarity call details. Welcome, Naomi, to a coaching episode of the Positively Living podcast. I am really excited to dig in to today's episode with you because we're stepping back and we are coaching. This is all about you today. I cannot wait to serve you. And I would love it if you would start by just telling us a bit about who you are, what's going on, and what's challenging you.
My name is Naomi Lerman. I am a certified trauma-informed coach, and I work with women who've experienced trauma, and I help them heal joyfully without reliving the past. I created a method called the Victory Dance Method, and it's very multifaceted, and I absolutely adore the work that I do. And I myself am a survivor of trauma. So I discovered that in order to really serve my clients to the full capacity that I would love to, and to really be with my family in the full capacity that I would love to, and keep my home, etc., all these pieces, as a trauma survivor, that can be difficult and things can come up. And at the same time, when I'm now coaching other trauma survivors, it can be a sort of a double-edged sword and a struggle because I want to be by myself in order to be able to serve them, you know? So it's like this added pressure piece that when I worked more in the corporate world, I didn't feel that pressure as much. And so now as a coach, I feel like I have to uphold myself to a certain standard for myself in order to be able to serve my clients properly.
It's almost as if you want to make sure that if I'm hearing you correctly, that you want to make sure that you're on your own path of healing and
Correct.
addressing that, at least energetically, in the same way.
Yeah, I don't need to be perfect. That's never my aim. And my aim is not to be healed whatsoever. Like I realize it's a lifelong journey that we're all on. And I want to be walking the walk when I'm talking the talk. It's really important to me.
And what connected you to me when you saw this as an opportunity?
So I found it so intriguing that you do these coaching sessions for everyone to hear. And it's a really interesting and intriguing concept. And not a lot of people that I know do it. So that was first and foremost. I enjoy being coached by other people. I think it's fun and enjoyable. I like learning new things. And also, there's just something about you. You give off this like sunshine. And I'm sure you have struggles and your days are hard and you hold so much, but you have the both and I can see that. And I saw that in your content and how you write and how you speak and everything. And so I just really connected with you and I was super excited about the concept.
Wonderful. Thank you. Well, I was super excited about what it is that you do. And that trauma informed part, I think, is so incredibly important. And you're right, that both and. And what I do here is very open and very vulnerable, but I want to model for others. I want to say, I'm asking you to do this, and you will lead a healthier, happier, more positive, more productive life if you do that. Well, I'm going to walk my own talk. So let's dig in. Speaking of which, one of the things that I start with, which I know is unusual and maybe unexpected for some, is to say, let's look into these personality traits and your strengths and core values and things like that. So I asked you to do some assessments ahead of time so we could compile some things that you may have already known about yourself, some surprises. And I am curious, any thoughts that you have from having done some of these assessments ahead of time?
So first of all, I love that you collect data before you go into a coaching session, and it's not subjective data like me answering questions on a form. It's all these multifaceted ways of looking at me in order to then improve my productivity. And I loved that idea going into it. And I also found it interesting the three different tests that I did were quite different and asking different questions, but putting all the pieces together really showed me things about myself that, like you said, like I know, but when you sort of see it written down and you see it very clearly, it was very interesting. And it's very much how the way my brain works. So I was so excited to hop now into this coaching session because I was like, well, if she has these things before I even get on the call, I mean, I'm going to be blown away once I actually get into the coaching session. There was one thing that came up when I was reading. I can't remember. I'm sure we'll go into each test, but there was one piece where I was like, really? Is that me? And so when I wrote to, I said, well, I believe I'm not. So I think perhaps I'm on the fence. And I think that's something that might be interesting to unpack because it was interesting to read that. And I was like, I don't think that is me. So I don't know. I'm curious to see what you think and where we'll go from here.
I love that you spotted that because that is absolutely on my list of questions to ask and to unpack because there are nuances within. And again, a lot of this is it's sort of like collecting circumstantial evidence
Right.
and it's all self-assessment related. So there's an element of what happens currently in your life and how you're feeling when you answer the question. And sometimes like I'm a questioner, so I'm always questioning the questions and I'm like, I don't even know if I answered that right. I think I could answer it differently today. And it's like, yeah, you're a questioner.
Right.
But
It's like the instructions say, like, go with your first instinct, but you're like, was that really my first instinct? I'm not really sure. Let's think about this for a minute,
you can tell you're a coach and that you're really like pro therapy when you're
Right.
like
I always used
questioning
to
the
joke,
questioning.
like filling out, the very traditional surveys that you fill out in the mental health world to even to give diagnosis. And because I'm a questioner and because I'm a thinker, like, well, if I answered it this way, I would then be diagnosed as this. And if I thought about it, then, like, are they really objective? I'm really not sure. But who knows? I'm not sure about this whole thing. We'll see.
And that's fair. Just like with circumstantial evidence, you can take an abundance of it and you can say, oh, here's a direction. And it's a jumping off point to have a conversation and to see where you are. And also, and this is so incredibly important, and here's a takeaway for everyone right off the bat. It's understanding the season of life that you're in and acknowledging that and the moment that you're in. In this moment, you answer the questions in this way.
Yeah.
So this is the conversation you need to have in order to figure out the adjustments that you can make to send you in the direction you want to go.
Yeah. I love that.
Okay, let's dig into these assessments and then I can ask some questions as well. And we can kind of make sure that we understand sort of the big picture that this helps us see. So I'll just quickly mention that in terms of character strength, spirituality.
Yeah, I wasn't so surprised by that.
Yeah. So understanding the connection there is just really being clear on a higher purpose. So some of the things that we saw in these different assessments that we'll pull together, and here's a great example, is that meaning behind things comes up for you a lot.
So much. I have a master's degree in museum studies, and most of my thesis was about meaning making. So I'm really not surprised.
There you go. So one hint right there that we're going to work on is to uncover how you can make sure that even in the finite, specific, logistical kind of ways that you create a schedule for yourself, that you select the tasks you're going to do, the way in which you attack those tasks, that there's meaning behind all of that.
I love that. I honestly have never made that connection before until you're saying it. And I was like, yes, that makes a lot of
Because that will
sense.
be your driver,
Yes,
okay?
yes.
Your strengths and your core values all drive you toward, even when you don't want to do the thing, you do the thing. If I could tell you how many times I have tried to, do a certain kind of exercise or maybe take supplements or do certain things, something that's weekly or daily, and I've struggled with it, but I've managed to put out a daily podcast for 5 years.
It's funny how that is, right?
I mean, weekly, but I've managed to work. Yeah,
Right.
it's a weekly podcast. But my point is, every single week for 5 years, I've managed to pull that together.
That's incredible. That's like a huge thing. But yet there's these certain things that like, why can't we do this? Why can't I put this into practice?
So meaning comes up for you a lot. So we want to keep watch over that and figure out ways in which we can infuse that. So the spirituality, by the way, what they call the virtue, the overarching virtue of that is called transcendence. And some of the other ones in there is gratitude, hope, and humor. Hope is one of
Ooh,
my big ones.
I
So
love
we
that.
definitely have some connections there. And so when you pay close attention to those things, because they're sort of the compatible elements, you'll probably see that you probably light up a great deal with those.
Yeah, for sure.
Now, shifting over to the big five is like psychologically one of the strongest self assessment tests out there. And one of my favorite parts of it is that it's a sliding scale. It's not saying, are you an introvert or an extrovert? Because life is not black and white. It's all of these different shades and variabilities. So, on a sliding scale, the big five, otherwise known as the ocean, because it spells OCEAN.
Nice.
So we have openness, conscientiousness, extroversion, agreeableness, and neuroticism. And I always like to mention, I do have an episode about this, about the big five, that neuroticism isn't exactly what it sounds like. It just means your inclination toward worry. And so you have some high scores here on openness. I'm not surprised. That indicates curiousness and creativity. And that's another thing that came up for you a lot is creativity.
Yeah, for sure.
Does that feel good? Does that feel accurate?
In all different aspects of my life I'm 40, I turned 40 a couple weeks ago. And throughout my entire life, creativity has been such a strong core value for me.
Okay. So creativity and meaning, if you can bring those even to the way in which you calendar something.
That's so
Feeling scattered or stuck? When your mind is full, it's hard to focus on what truly matters. That's where the guided mind sweep comes in. A short mindfulness style practice designed to help you release mental clutter, reduce stress, and create space for what's next. It's free, easy to do anytime, and listeners tell me it's a game changer for refocusing fast. You can find the guided mind sweep package for free at positivelyproductive.com/PLP sweep.
interesting. To me, they sound like opposites, but you're like, okay, just look at it from a different lens, bring yourself to the process, and it will change everything for you. This is so
Yeah,
interesting.
I know. It like 'cause sometimes it sounds silly to say I color code my calendar, and it's like, well, why are you color code? Yeah, I'm like because it's fun, because it's easy for me to spot when I'm missing a part of it. Because I know what color is my self care color versus a
Right.
color that is relating to my business, and different indicators can kind of very simply tell me where the balance and where the harmony is or
Oh,
maybe
I
isn't.
love that. Oh, yes, yes. I totally see that. I see what you're saying.
So the extroversion, 81% high. So that's a fairly simple thing to consider. And it doesn't always mean I want to be social, but it does mean externally processing. So I'm not surprised that you like to be coached. And this is a really good opportunity for you to be able to exchange ideas because there's a magic in that.
Yeah, and the super interesting thing though with when I saw the number and it was so high, I need a lot of time to myself and I need a lot of
Hmm.
quiet. And although I love to be with other people and I love to be, like you said, in harmony with other people, I definitely max out and need quiet and alone time. And I wonder if it's because of the trauma that I've experienced throughout my life. So it's like alarm bells going off in me and I need rest. Like if there had been a total different life process and I hadn't experienced those things, would I need to have more an introverted way of charging my batteries? I'm not sure. It's a question I've asked myself a few times, but I definitely love being with people. I just have to really make time and awareness for rest and quiet. I have 3 little boys. It's just a lot of noise in my house. So it's like I can see when I'm maxing out, it's because I haven't sat in a quiet space by myself.
So that's an important point to note. And so that's also an important point to bring into how you lay out your day. So we'll get to
Yeah.
that. I do have some ideas and some
Yay.
questions related to, your transition time and your recuperation time. So to your point, trauma is a big part of my life as well. And I've asked myself the same questions. But one thing I want you to consider in terms of this extroversion idea is not only that it can still be true, it can be the both end that you need all this extra time, but that this is also part of who you are. But that extroversion, or tapping into it, I should say, can look very different. I have noticed even with AI, and I'm not even talking about like where we're going with like all the sort of questions and the drama behind it. I'm actually saying in every case, like when you even doing like Google searches or whatever, there's an exchange that happens. You're asking a question, it's bringing you back data, you're comparing, you're asking another question. That's an exchange as opposed to, searching for something, especially in like or maybe the chat bots or things like that, where you're asking a question, you're receiving a response, you're asking a follow-up. That's an exchange that introverts may appreciate it because it's not a human,
Right.
but extroverts that like to exchange energy and ideas may find some benefit from it. So these are the kinds of things that you can look for that may tap into your extroversion, but not necessarily drain your battery.
It's so interesting because I have tried so many productivity tools. And one of the struggles that I have are these very dry, you put in something and one set of information comes back and you can't ask questions. And there isn't a malleability or creativity to it. And I never understood why. And now it makes so much sense. Like I love ChatGPT. I just find it interesting and intriguing and I like the exchange, like you said. So it's something that I already knew, but I didn't understand. So that's really, really interesting for me that you just explained it that way. And it makes total sense to me why I've been
And
struggling
the fact
and have yet to find the best tool for myself.
and that you tell me that you like chat, that may very well be the reason.
Oh, interesting.
Or at least that may be part of it. So that's something to consider. Okay. Now, and so we've had OCE. Now we're at the A, which is agreeableness, 71%. That's being cooperative. It's being empathetic. And again, when we see what we already know about you, nobody's surprised.
See, it actually made me happy that it was 71% because I really struggled with codependency and I went through the 12-step program for codependency. So the fact that it was 71% and not like 99%, I was like, I've done some work here. This is good news for me. That's sort of what it felt like when I
Wow.
read that number.
You just answered one of my questions because I did have, we'll get to it in a minute, a little bit more about that, but people pleasing was
Oh, yes.
actually
Mhm.
one of my questions. So you've already hinted at that. So the last one we mentioned, neuroticism, 56%, that is moderate. And to me, that simply means you're not an extreme worrier and you're not like, whatever, it's kind of like that middle ground. So far, what we're seeing is exchange of ideas, creative, curious, but, with the conscientiousness, did I skip over that? But 60% organized and disciplined.
But I found that very interesting also.
But that goes along with the next thing I wanted to bring up, which is the upholder, and that is the Gretchen Rubin four tendencies. And I like to use that as a productivity coach because when it indicates how we respond to expectations, whether inner or outer, and this, of course, is her construct. So, it has its limitations, but the idea that we are driven to take action
Mhm.
by either inner expectations or outer expectations, or maybe a combination or maybe neither. And that's really what the four tendencies are. So
Interesting.
for those of you playing at home, upholders is a combination. Rebels is neither. You can't tell me what to do. I can't tell me what to do. And then questioners is inner only. Like, does it make sense to me? And obligers are outer only. They really need accountability. They show up for others. And that doesn't mean that the other tendencies don't show up for others. It doesn't have anything to do with other aspects of character like altruism and giving and people pleasing and all that. It simply means that you're driven to take action. And so if you understand the driver, just like we talked about with meaning and character and core values, the more you understand that driver, the more you can manipulate in the best possible way how you set up your environment and, what you're doing in order to make sure action is taken.
Interesting.
With obliger, it tends to say you got a little bit of both, internal expectations are important to you, but external as well. Now, what Gretchen Rubin has indicated is that you can tip in one direction or another because it's like, it reminds me a little bit of a Venn diagram, which is like one of my love languages, but it's the four circles. But really, it's an opportunity to tip in one direction or another. And in this case, when it comes to an upholder, you can either tip toward questioner or you can tip toward obliger. So without actually further taking tests, but kind of giving a general assessment, I'm curious if when it comes down to it and you kind of have your inner expectations and your outer expectations, do you have a feeling of whether or not you want to understand it yourself internally the most, and then that's going to drive you to do the thing, or whether if someone needs you to do it, then that's going to be your override?
It's so interesting because I thought I would have a really quick answer, but now that I'm coming to think of it, on certain things, I need outside accountability. And that's something very, very helpful for me. But I found through my healing process, I've moved more into the questioner, more into being my own accountability and being able to be there for myself more completely. So I think the reason I can't answer it directly, because I think it sort of depends on the day. It depends where I'm sitting with my healing. It depends maybe where I am in my cycle, even. It could be, like,
Sure.
so I want to say leaning towards questioner, but I'm not sure if that's a fully honest answer because there's definitely times where I'm like, nah, I need all the accountability in the world. So,
And that's fair. And accountability itself is not something that we don't all necessarily need. It's
right.
just that when it comes to taking action, and again, according to this specific construct, the way she describes obligers is you can count on me and I'm counting on you to count on me. It's the
Oh,
person
wow.
who will read the book, but then it's because there's a book club, or is far better off about taking yoga classes because they're now teaching yoga classes and they're showing
Yeah.
up for others, versus questioner, which is I'll comply if you convince me why.
I think I'm more the second one. I think I'm more the questioner. Hearing you say that, I definitely need, like you said, a meaning in order to. It's like an internal thing that once I've made that shift, I'm able to do it.
Great. So the reason that I asked that question, and again, this is pulling together some ideas that we can explore to drill down to ways in which you can make minute adjustments that may help you with your consistency and with showing up. Now, upholders are also known for a certain aspect or tendency toward being rigid. And that's in part because there's a consistency about them, which is a very good thing. Now, one of the things that you had said was that you saw that there was a reference to like last minute changes being a challenge. And you're like, I don't know if that's the case. And I mean, that might also be because you're trained as a mom. You're like, my life is last minute changes. There could be many reasons why. But what I am curious about is if it's also described in Gretchen's book as like a tightening. Sometimes people refer to it as a rigidity. There can be a thing where you become consistent and you do something and you lock in, but then it's hard to unlock that. And that may be a grander or bigger picture of change. How do you feel about that?
So I still don't align with that whatsoever. And the truth is, like,
Good.
I 100% was committed to the idea that I am not a schedule person. Schedules ruin me as a human, and that there's no way you could ever get me to stick to a schedule. And then as I've gotten further in my healing process, I realize I might not like them, but they're very useful. They help me regulate. They keep me very aligned with myself. I feel much more fulfilled because if I set a time to do something and I do it within that time, I feel very good about myself. So it also helps with that piece of like feeling enough in my life. And when I realized I guess this is the meaning making, like you said, when I realized what schedules could do for me, even though it sort of felt like rubbing sandpaper on my skin when I first started doing it was like a deep breath of full oxygen when I could actually stick to the schedules. But I still have this like free spirited part of me. And the truth is, it's like this unique aspect to my coaching is that because as a trauma survivor, I feel like sometimes things trigger us and we get thrown off and we can't expect it. And sometimes it's like 3 hours before an appointment. And yes, I could show up and totally not be present, or the person I'm working with could be flexible enough and understanding enough that you could cancel last minute. So that is something that I actually keep in my coaching practice is I allow for last minute changes if there's respect on both sides, et cetera. And again, so I wonder if this is coming from the trauma, this intense need for flexibility. So I think that's also why reading it triggered me a bit because I was like, no, that's so not me. Like my coaching practice runs on the idea that I am totally open to flexibility and change. So I found it very interesting. And I'm open to the idea that maybe that might be a healthier version of me, not like extreme rigidity, but being a little bit more rigid in my life might be something that's helpful to me, just like scheduling all of a sudden became such a gift when I could understand it.
Sometimes all you need is someone to help you cut through the chaos and make sense of it all. That's what my clarity call is for. In just 30 minutes, we'll get to the heart of what's blocking you and outline simple, doable steps forward. It's a compassionate, no pressure, budget friendly way to get moving in the right direction. Learn more and book your spot for only $55 at positivelyproductive.com/PLP Clarity. It's so interesting because the catchphrase for upholders is discipline is my freedom.
If you told me that 5 years ago, I probably
You'd be
would have
like,
like
stop.
laughed in your face and be like, no way.
You're like, try again.
Right. I started working with a coach like 2 years ago, and I was like, yeah, I'm allergic to schedules. She was like, let's table that. Like, we'll see when you're ready to like be open to the idea.
I can completely understand that. And if I had a nickel for every time I heard that, I have two nickels, which, isn't a lot, but it's odd that it happened twice, right? But no, this is definitely something in there that I have actually seen in connection with creatives because I work with
Oh,
creatives a lot.
that makes total sense to me.
Right?
Yeah.
Because you want to be creative and because inherently that sort of discipline, consistency, there was something that I read in the assessment where it was like, you don't want to be bogged down by the dull details,
No.
right? You want the interesting stuff, so you don't want to talk about scheduling. Oh my gosh, what's that about? Which is why I was saying the more that we can connect meaning and creativity to it.
But the really cool thing is that now when people talk about scheduling, I have like butterflies and I get excited because I've been able to attach meaning to it. I didn't realize that's what was the cause because you just explained it in that way. But now I know, I get it. And I like schedules because it makes me feel good about myself when I'm able to
I love that.
make a schedule and stick to it. And I know my family is happier and my life is more aligned.
Yeah, you get to breathe a little bit more because it's almost like you've automated the choices. Because one of the
Yes.
things, and that's a perfect segue into the challenges that you expressed, one of them was decision fatigue.
Yes.
And when you set up a schedule, you reduce decision fatigue, which is a very real thing, especially for moms and
Yes.
especially for the mental load that you have with that.
Yes.
If you're like, this is what we're doing at this time, then you don't get to that time and say, okay, now what are we doing?
And also when other things come up, it's like, okay, that's not for today. It's not in the schedule. I don't have to feel bad about myself because I'm not getting to it because it would have never fit in the first place. So I can just like let it go and be okay with that.
Boundaries protect you, and they go both ways. It's not only about, as Mark Grove says, it's I can't remember the exact quote, but it's like they don't put up walls, they show people where the door is.
Right.
And that's for you as well, because then if you do have the codependency, if you do have the people pleasing, if you do have that, at least I know it's been in my experience where you want to be the people pleaser, but then also you're totally rebellious about it because
Yes.
you're a trauma survivor and you're healing. And that part of the healing is no
Have
way,
you been a fly on my ball, Lisa? Like, oh, come on now. Do we know each
Exactly.
other?
I get it. I get it. I see you. Okay, so you mentioned some of the challenges. Decision fatigue was one of them. You mentioned context switching, tool sprawl. I love that you mentioned that. And that's simply, I think, because you are creative and curious, you are going to be inclined to be like, will this solve my problem? Will this solve my problem? Let me try this thing. Now I'm trying a new app. Now I'm trying a notebook. This notebook is going to solve my life. Like,
It's the tool to
right?
heal all tools, right?
Yes, which I get. And also it's a dopamine hit when
Yes.
you're like, ooh, new planner,
Right.
which I used for 2 days,
Right.
but
If.
don't judge me. Okay, so context switching, tool sprawl, and then one I thought that really kind of like I wanted to highlight was the capacity idea. And I think we are going to resolve that as we start to break down and lay out things.
Amazing.
And again, more of the structure, more of the scheduling, that will continue to help you with the boundaries and the decision fatigue. And then also, that's something else that we will address as we go.
Amazing. Thank you.
Going back to your focus, I just wanted to repeat some of the words to you that you had said in terms of your desire. Shame-free systems, which of course is, it's right in the title of the podcast. It's exactly what I'm going for, right? But value aligned. And we talked about that, right? Your values and your strengths too. So having a weekly system where you're doing the right work at the right time. So with that in mind, I have a few ideas, but I want to be very clear to start. What is the right work, Naomi? What are you looking to accomplish? What is on your list?
I think the
In
biggest,
broad strokes, at
right. I
least.
was like, I think the biggest piece is setting up a schedule where I get to the end of the day and I'm not questioning my worth. I'm not saying, am I enough? Like, I feel so frustrated that my house isn't always spotless. And I feel so frustrated that I struggle with context switching. Like I have a book publicity day job that I have sort of held on to because I just find it interesting and I enjoy it. And he might give me a few projects and technically, intellectually, I could do it. But then switching between them, it's a huge struggle for me. And then again, I come with this feeling like, wow, I'm not enough. I'm stupid. Why can't you just do that? So I think in broad strokes, it's putting a system in place that feels manageable and relevant and achievable so that when I get to the end of the day, I can look around and I have a clean space and I don't feel overwhelmed and I'm not afraid what the tomorrow is going to bring. And I just have that sense of sort of ease and harmony, not just the end of the day, in the morning and at night. Because sometimes, we also wake up feeling completely overwhelmed. So having that sort of balance and harmony and having that come through, I think, schedules, like you said, and being able to stick to it in a way that makes meaning for me so it doesn't feel like the rebel's gonna like come flying out and be like, we're not doing this anymore.
Yeah. And you may have that, but if you have the flexibility within there, it's kind of like
Exactly.
finding that correct combination.
Yeah.
But I think what you said initially as you were describing this is one of the most powerful statements. And I promise you, if I said, raise your hand if this one resonated with you, we would have tons of listeners immediately raising their hand. Is at the end of the day, you don't want to be questioning your worth.
Yes. Huge.
With that in mind, I want to touch upon a few things that sort of came up for me as I was assessing where you stand, what you're asking for, the challenges that you have, what matters to you, the nature of your personality, all of the things that we assessed that I started thinking about that I wanted to ask you about today. One of the first things that actually came up for me was a little less strategic. I do have strategic as well, but it was the acknowledging the season of life that you're in.
Yeah, that one's really hard for me.
Yeah, I can imagine it is. And that's why I started with it, because that's my job as your coach.
I can look around at other women and be like, yes, they should totally understand the stage of life that they're in. And then I look at myself and I'm like, no, to me, that's just an excuse and I'm not willing to accept that. But that's so
How old are
me.
your boys?
8, 6, and 2.
Say that again, please.
8, 6, and 2.
hmm
I know, but it's like,
But
it's
I know,
so hard.
but
Life is so short, I feel like. And like, I just want to maximize every moment. That's where it's coming from. It's not coming from,
yes,
I'm whipping myself and I think I'm a terrible person or that maybe I should think I'm better than other people so I can do more. It's not coming from that. It's coming from, for me, every minute, every second of my life is so valuable. And the way that my story has been unfolding up into this moment, where I've come to my life at this point was not the one option. There are a myriad of options, and some were very terrible. And I'm so grateful that my life looks as it does. So it just feels like every second counts. But then it's a double edged sword, and I end up feeling not good enough. And why can't I do this? And then that's like a freeze point because who can do anything when they're basically yelling at themselves? So, it's this
that's
catch
right.
22.
Yeah. You can't hate yourself into a version of yourself that you love.
Right? Some days I wish I could, but it's just not how the world is made. Although it doesn't feel good. Do I wish it? Not so much. But at the same time, it might make things go faster. I'm not sure.
Granted, these could be like entire coaching sessions together that we could unpack. So we're kind of like hovering. Let's take a moment to tap into that mindset there and to understand that saying conceptually, yes, I have kids and I know that there's a lot of demand there, but then the precious few moments that I have, I want to make the most of. That then becomes how you are assessing what moments are of value and what kind of value they are and what kind of value they are to you. And the reason I'm saying it in that way, which is very generic, is because you get to choose. And this is why it really bothers me when you have conversations, mom to mom, especially where it's like, yes, but you should cherish the moments you have. That didn't say that. I didn't say that I didn't cherish those moments,
Exactly.
although sometimes with my kids, it was like, I can't miss you if you don't go away. And I mean that with all the love.
Right, of course.
But there's also the what feeds you
Right.
and what touches upon what drives you and then what actually connects with that. So stepping back, one of the things that I encourage my clients to do is to figure out the things that you cannot go your day without. Like for me, for example, it's music,
Mhm.
but there'll be a sliding scale. So my question to you in terms of the kinds of things you're trying to achieve, maybe the goals that you have in your business, the hobbies, whatever it is that you're trying to incorporate in your day, think about what a sliding scale representative of each of those things would be. So if it is a priority to you, if you're like, I want to work with my clients and I want to do what I'm doing, this is important work and it feeds my soul,
Mhm.
well, then absolutely. Now, that may look differently in this season than it will in, let's say, 3 years when your youngest is of kindergarten age.
Right.
So kind of looking at that, looking at what it can look like now, also giving yourself that sort of runway to say, this matters to me. I'm acknowledging it. And so then that brings you back to acknowledging, prioritizing, but prioritizing with your capacity being honored.
Yeah, that's the hardest piece. And not prioritizing too many things because that also
Hmm.
tugs at the capacity piece also.
Okay. So a couple of things with that. I definitely have episodes on prioritizing and
Yes.
how challenging that can be when you are multi-passionate, when you have so many things that you want to do. So my next suggestion would be keeping track of what these things are that you really want to do and considering that capacity can sometimes be how much can I do in a day? How much can I do in a week? Capacity can be how much energy do I have
Yeah.
to do the thing? And that was one thing I wanted to make sure that we address today is how you're feeling about your energy. But another thing that can happen in terms of capacity is, let's say you have Tuesday evenings available for an appointment. I'm just throwing it out there as an example. And if it's an appointment that doesn't need to happen every single week, that changes the capacity for you, right?
Right. Right.
Okay, so if you are working on something, let's say a project relating to some kind of work to your business, and you have a certain amount of time to fulfill that, but you have two things that are really battling it out and you are struggling to prioritize them, you can alternate them. You can have alternating weeks. for example.
Interesting. It doesn't all have to happen all at once, but it could be scheduled. So first and third week of the month, for example, is one thing, and second and third. And
Yes.
then it doesn't have like the context switch issue because I know when it's going to happen every week and I'm not having to try to switch from one thing to the other. Oh, that's very interesting. I really like that idea.
Alternating so that you have a longer stretch so you don't have the context switching struggle, like you said,
Right.
but it still touches upon it. And you're like, I'm sure you probably even thought about two examples, but we'll just say project A and project B. And you can say, yeah, first and third weeks is I'm working on project A. And then this way, you can take project B and say, I'm coming for you. Don't worry. I'll be
Right.
there. And that lets go of that pressure to say, or even just that internal dialogue or monologue, I guess, unless you're talking to yourself, what I do, but
Sometimes I do also.
whatever those inner voices are saying, it's the idea that you're not going to be using the words, I didn't get to that.
Right.
What's
And
wrong with
what's
me?
so interesting about what you said is that I realize right now my window has been either 24 hours or maybe maximum a week. I look at my life as like weeks at a time. But if I could extend that to say a month or even 6 months for bigger projects, then the pressure's off and it's like there's a larger capacity because it's a longer extent of time. I've never thought, for me, it's always been okay, we go week by week. That makes sense. We all have a calendar with the Google Calendar that's, like 1 week. The month just looks so overwhelming. Who can manage that? But if you think about it differently with a different lens and say, no, it's like my life works in months and I'm going to schedule things in that way, I'm still getting everything in
Mhm.
and it's more stretched out. So it feels less pressured. I really love that idea. Thank you. I really resonate with that.
Wonderful. We're marking that down as an action item for you to take a look at that. And if I may add, one additional way to adjust it is when you're selecting the months or you're selecting these time frames, you can also look at your literal seasons of your life,
Yeah, agreed. So
right?
do
It's
you
a
usually
cyclical
do
thing.
like a year at a time with your clients, or do you usually do a month, or it's just totally dependent on each individual person and how they look at things?
It's mostly dependent upon each person because sometimes the overwhelm is so real. It's like I can barely consider what's happening next week.
Right.
But as a general approach that I would recommend most often, I would say quarterly at
Okay.
least.
Okay. Yeah.
And then sometimes I'll do quarterly and I'll think of it as 2 quarters where one of them is more detailed. I'll do that for myself as well, where it's like the next quarter, the final quarter of the year, we're ramping up, we know the specifics, and then I'll have lightly sketched out the first quarter of, let's say,
Oh,
the
that's so
next year.
interesting. So you don't feel this intense pressure to do like every quarter of your life, basically, but you start to
Right.
think about the
Because
next
think about
year.
how much changes over the course of time. So you want to have that flexibility and you want to have that creativity and you want to have the openness to adjust,
Right.
which calms down the rebel creature in there that wants to like rear its ugly head and say, you have scheduled out my entire life and I'm not okay with this.
Exactly.
So, yeah, I think we've hit upon something here in terms of, and it came from that season of life idea, but not just the season of life. It's like what you want to accomplish, what it means to you, how you prioritize, and then how you kind of shift out all the things that you want to do and place them intentionally. This reminds me a little bit of the 4D framework that
Hmm.
I've talked about on the podcast. I will definitely link episodes. I'll share those links with you so that you
Thank
can
you.
listen to those specifically. And for anyone else listening, you may want to check this out as well. But the idea of the 4Ds is that you're intentionally sort of whittling down what's in front of you that you feel you must be done or needs to be on the task list in a way that's intentional. So when you do something, yes, you'll delegate, sometimes you'll delete. So it's in a specific order because sometimes it really doesn't belong. And we do need to be ruthless about that.
Mhm.
But if you're still at a point where you're like, oh, I have all these things that I love so much,
Mhm.
at that point, delaying intentionally can be a very powerful tool because it means you will get to it. It's how you increase your capacity in a different way.
And it doesn't feel like a punishment. Like doing it the way
No,
I was doing it felt sort of like, oh, you didn't get to it. Oh, like it's like
right.
a bad thing. But this is no, like I'm intentionally delaying it. So it sort of removes that moral piece to it.
Exactly. And just like a toy that you take away from the kids for a while and then you bring back out for a season, it's like, oh my gosh, it's the best thing ever. Like,
Exactly.
yes,
Yeah.
exactly. So you'll be that much more excited and fresh and productive
Right.
when you attend to it. Okay. So let me see. We talked about season of life. We talked about your list and the priorities and the runway. Theme days did come up for me, but I feel as though you've probably done this kind of work, but it's again, it's those larger boundaries.
Yeah.
And we're now talking about that in terms of weeks and months and quarters and things like that. But it is that idea of having a bit more space around the boundaries so that you can have some flexibility within. And
Yeah.
that was really more of the so that you didn't feel that rigidity or feel that kind of rebel coming up.
Yeah, exactly.
But I think what would be good for us in terms of like wrapping things up is to talk a little bit about, we did mention the context switching and how that will be addressed with having the longer runway and
Yeah.
having the intentional delay. Do you feel, in terms of the things that you do need to tend to each day, and because I'm sure the day is still going to be crammed, let's
Right.
be realistic here.
Right.
How do you feel about your transition time? Oh, the other thing you also mentioned that we could also address, if that feels like a better thing to answer, would be the idea of closing out the day properly, and then how, when you start the day again, you feel overwhelmed, which feels like a better place
I
for us
honestly
to
think they're
land.
interconnected. Like making sure I used to not give myself any transition time at all. And then I would be so angry at myself that I was always late everywhere. But it was sort of, I was setting myself up for that. So then I would end the day feeling not good about myself because I'd been like, I didn't finish anything that I wanted. So it's that idea of rest and that idea of transitions and actually scheduling that in allows me to end the day feeling much more fulfilled and then waking up like more energized and ready for the day when I know I'm going to have moments of rest and time to myself that are sort of scheduled in. So I think they're sort of interconnected.
Good. I like that a lot. So I'll add something else for you to reframe this. One of the things that I'm trying to teach my children, I say trying to teach my children, let's be
Right?
clear, it's a learning process for us all. But it's the idea that, for example, when we have a task like doing the laundry, the task itself is actually multifaceted. It is grabbing the laundry, washing the laundry, drying the laundry, folding the laundry, putting the laundry away.
Right.
The task is not complete until all those components are complete.
Yeah.
You can get partial credit, don't get me wrong, you know.
Right, right,
I
right.
get partial credit all the time for leaving stuff in the dryer for way too long, okay? But the point is, all of those components must be completed. So if you start to think about a task including more components than you think of,
Yes.
and one is the time to prep and the time to process after. For example, with my clients, part of what I schedule is time before to prepare for the call,
Mhm.
and then time after to process, to send them their notes. I send Google Docs, with like checklists and summaries and links and things like that. So the follow-up time, for example, is part of the full task, if you will.
That's so interesting because I do it with like pickup time and stuff like that, but I've never thought about it for like when I have my sessions with my clients I do struggle sometimes after to take the notes because I've crushed too many things in. So just literally seeing it as like an hour and a half, 15 minutes before, 15 minutes after the session. And the whole thing is an hour and a half and it's not adjustable because it's all one
Right.
piece. I think that would be really, really helpful. So
Also, from a productivity standpoint, when you have these things fresh in your mind, they're actually going to go quicker,
yes, yeah, totally quicker.
as opposed to later being like, what did we talk about?
Right, but also like when my clients receive it, they feel the energy of the conversation we just had and the excitement and the hope or whatever it is. They feel it in the notes. Whereas if I do it like a day later, it's missing that piece. So I think it's really important to me to do it at that time also.
100%. So it's good for you. It's good for them. Everybody wins.
Yeah,
So that idea of bookending
correct.
your tasks, bookending your day, and then just making sure that you have a safe capture
Yeah.
at the end of your day, thinking about how you mentioned how things are so interconnected. And I would encourage you to keep seeing that, seeing your tasks as being connected to, even though they are very specific, structural, tangible tasks, the way in which you tend to them can be creative and meaningful. Seeing that the way you close out your day is also going to set up the way you open the next day,
Right. That connection
right?
I'm not making yet. I totally understand what you're saying intellectually, and I have to figure out a way to really put it into practice.
So one of the things I would suggest, and it's the simplest thing, and it's sort of a two-part here. One is thinking about closing out your desk or your workspace, in that you are even 5 minutes really of putting things away, closing up a notebook. For me, I use a Rocket book. So what I do is I scan the notes, make sure everything's checked off, and then clean that out. Something like that, just straightening a little, that feels psychologically like closing it out. And it also sets you up for when you come back to your desk, even if it's not the next day, but the next session.
Right.
The second thing is having a dedicated notebook that you write in to say where you left off.
Oh,
And
wow.
say, what I really want to do first thing in the morning is tackle this. What I didn't finish and I wanted to was this. Understanding, like Simon Sinek says, it's the infinite game, right? There isn't really, yes, we do have some stopping points. Yes, we do have some goals that we set. When we have smaller bits of projects, we can celebrate those wins, those milestones. But so much of what we do is continuous, that it can be disheartening and it can also be confusing. So the disheartening part, we have to keep celebrating the small wins. The confusing part, we have to track where we are. You want to think about mentally having a bookmark to say, this is where I left off. This is what I want to tackle first. This is what I'm excited about. Whatever it is, just jot down a few notes. So at the very last thing you do is you jot those down. And then in the morning, the very first thing you do is take a look at those notes. That's it.
I love that. It totally interconnects everything. That's great. Such a good idea.
Yep. Okay. I will leave you with that. This is a place for us to wrap up, and I will ask, how do you feel? What's jumping out at you?
I feel excited and inspired to really tackle these things that have been blocks for me for quite some time. And I felt a little bit afraid to look at them because they definitely draw me to that feeling of like non-worthiness and not enoughness or whatever. Not the best English. And so the way you put it in such a gentle way and so many different creative ideas and really utilizing who I am as a person and bringing that to the work, it totally changes the way of looking at things. So I deeply appreciate that. And so I'm excited to start looking at this and figuring out how to tackle it in my life properly.
Wonderful. Well, I'm excited to send you the notes. I'm excited to share this with everyone because I think so many of the challenges you have, we all face.
Yes.
And I'm so grateful and honored that you trusted me, that you were able to share so fully, and that I can feel like I'm supporting you in the really important work that you do as well.
Thank you so much. I really, really appreciate it. This session has been really incredible. Thank you.
Thank you for joining me today. Your time is precious, and I'm honored you chose to spend it with me. I hope this episode inspired you, and I encourage you to think about one action you can take based on today's topic. Then share it with me so I can cheer you on. Go to positivelyproductive.com to connect with me, read blog posts, and access links from each episode and download resources.